Hey travelers, Mag and I here on day 295 of our trip around the United States. Last night, we crossed out of Wyoming into the eastern side of Idaho and then up through Montana. And we are ready to start our day and our Montana portion of this trip in earnest. Like Wyoming, we're going to be breaking Montana in half. Over the next 4 days, Aichan and I will be covering the eastern side of Montana. Not the very, very far east, because just like the southern edge of the state, we've chipped away at the entirety of the eastern counties and pages when we came in through the other states on the earlier portion of our trip last year. For the next 4 days, we're going to be covering a ton of miles as we work our way through the interior and north through the state. Today's route is going to consist of 450 miles. That carries us in from Idaho, all the way up through Bozeman to where we are in Livingston now, and all the way east across the state. When we wake up tomorrow, we're going to have about another 400 miles to cover as we make our way north, all the way up to the top edge of the state. Then, on that third day, we're going to be wrapping our way back around through to the interior over the course of 290 miles. Our main goal for that third day is to ensure that we add our names to the County Challenge Final for Montana. And then on the fourth day, we'll circle back around another 450 miles through the rest of the eastern interior until we bring our day to an end at Great Falls. Great Falls makes pretty much the perfect halfway mark for our trip in Montana. So that's where Aichan and I are aiming to call it at the halfway point and assess where we have to go from there. Even though we're further north than we were in Wyoming, I'm looking forward to a bit warmer weather here in Montana. That's because Wyoming's average elevation is almost twice that of Montana. So while we may be at more northern elevations, we are going to be significantly lower and hopefully out of that snow. Keep those fingers crossed for us because I'm really trying to be done with that white fluffy stuff. Either way, Aichan and I have a little more than a week in store for us as we explore our way through the state of Montana. So let's get out there together and see what it has in store. Come on, let's go.
We begin our journey through Montana in Livingston, the county seat of Park County with a population of about 8,000 people. Livingston was founded as a direct result of the Northern Pacific Railway. The area provided a centralized point for railroad shops to service steam trains before ascending up through Bozeman Pass. If here during the warm months, you can also learn more about this history at the Yellowstone Gateway Museum. Just down the road, we slide into Big Timber, the county seat of Sweetgrass County with a population of about 1,600 people. This is a quick stop right off the interstate and back on again, but while we're here, we check out the statue of the crazy painter, modeled after Charles Marion Russell, who masterfully captured the art and soul of the American West through more than 4,000 works of art. Continuing to follow the I-90 East, our next stop is in Billings at the Yellowstone County Museum. Located right outside of the Billings-Logan International Airport with a fantastic view over the city, this county museum was founded in 1953 by the Yellowstone Historical Society. Through the cooperative efforts of the Yellowstone Historical Society, the Parmalee-Billings Library, the Pioneers of Eastern Montana, Yellowstone County, and the City of Billings, the museum has been able to open its doors to the public since 1956. Their mission is to collect, preserve, and share the history of Montana's Yellowstone River Basin through a range of dynamic educational programs and storytelling exhibitions. The museum is rather deceptive, as the entrance is the McCormick Cabin, which was built as a space for social gatherings by Paul McCormick in 1893. While the McCormick Cabin is certainly big as cabins go, it is very small as museums go. But that's because all of the real treasures are located downstairs in the exhibitions. It is quite expansive, and it turns out there are a ton of exhibits to walk through here. With a relatively new virtual easily marking the location on the map, and free entry to the public, there's absolutely no reason not to come visit this fantastic museum.
I gotta tell you, these look like some pretty spacious accommodations right now. Maybe I should switch to a wagon.
Reaching Miles City, the county seat of Custer County with a population of about 8,300 people, is our signal point that our time on the interstate is done, turning north and heading further into the state from here. In Garfield County, we reach the city of Jordan, one of the smallest county seats in the state, with a population of only about 350 people in the city and about 1,200 people in the county. Despite its small size, Jordan features a Veterans Memorial that is well worth checking out. There are plenty of geocache options to choose from as we continue along this route, and having been along the interstate most of the day, there are an abundance of travel bug hotels for us to drop in and visit. Even though I have no intention of moving travel bugs whatsoever, I am still happy to discover them within each travel bug hotel that we come across. I always seek out this kind of hide because they have to be in containers that are at least large enough to hold travel bugs, which means there's going to be plenty of swag to choose from in each one. Some of the non-travel bugs we sought out were relatively standard, the kind of geocache container that we have come across in many small towns across the country as we've continued our travels. Some of them, however, managed to put a very unique twist on what we are normally used to seeing. Who needs to build a birdhouse geocache when instead you can construct a tiny little gardening shed to hide your container? And since this is a very user-driven game, sometimes you find yourself having to get inside the head of the hider to make the find. And sometimes the head of that hider is not a place you want to spend a lot of time.
You saw nothing. I was barely even here.
In many states that we have traveled through, the loneliest parts of the states are located along the edges that we have to go out through for some of the very small DeLorme pages. But here in Montana, the loneliest parts that we came across were smack dab in the middle of the eastern side of the state, where we pretty much only saw livestock all morning long. A fact that Aichan seemed to enjoy greatly this morning. On our approach to Fort Peck, we follow in the footsteps of Lewis and Clark, who had explored this area early in May of 1805. Ascending to the top of the hill, it is easy to imagine yourself in the shoes of William Clark, looking out over the land spread out below you. A quote directly from their journal entry reads, "The water of this river possesses a peculiar whiteness. From the color of its water, we called it Milk River." Coming down from the heights, we come into Fort Peck to visit the Northeast Montana Veterans Memorial Park, dedicated to the public on July 4th of 2016. The memorial honors all American servicemen and women throughout history who have fought for the United States, with special gratitude and respect for Montana veterans. And this state has certainly never slacked when it came to defending our freedoms. This state, per capita, represents the highest participation in World War II and the second highest percentage of combat deaths within the nation. Continuing directly to the center of the middle of nowhere, we come into Glasgow, the county seat of Valley County, with a population of about 3,200 people. This small county seat may well and truly be in the middle of nowhere, but it is still an important economic hub, being the largest city for over 100 miles in any direction. Its population peaked during the Cold War, but immediately began to decline again with the closure of Glasgow Air Force Base in 1969. We follow the sound of the heartbeat of the Milk River Valley into Harlem in Blaine County, with a population of about 800 people. The Centennial Park, established in 1987, features a memorial to 13 airmen who lost their lives during a cargo plane collision in 1992. As we make our way along the long, lonely country roads here in the Great Plains of Montana, we have learned to keep our eyes open. Anywhere along the hundreds upon hundreds of miles of barbed wire fencing that parallel the roads, you might just happen across a quirky metal art sculpture. These metallic oddities seem to be distributed at random, but it seemed to me that the lonelier the road was, the higher the chances of happening across one of these. The origins of these unique pieces of roadside art can be traced back to Cory Holmes from Havre. For more than 20 years, he has been bolting his artwork to lonely prairie fence posts during the middle of the night and then driving off. Many of these can now be easily sought out using the FPA series of geocaches, which is exactly what we did. Along those lonely Montana roads, we drop into the small town of Stanford with a population of right about 400 people. Despite it being the county seat for Judith Basin County, it hasn't exactly grown much since it was first established as a trading post in 1875. Lewistown, established just a few years later in 1879, experienced a rapid population growth, now with about 6,000 people living here. The city was planned for development in 1882 and became the site of a gold rush, serving as an important railway destination supplying the surrounding communities with bricks. Prior to that gold rush, Maiden had been the largest city in the area, but when their gold supply ran out, many of those miners moved to Lewiston and settled here permanently. While exploring our way across this beautiful city, we happened across the Veterans Memorial Park and immediately pulled in for a closer look. While paying our respects, we thought about the mural titled "Freedom is Not Free." Young and not so young, many of us served very far from home and had to grow up in a hurry. In our hearts were always those we had left behind. We, the veterans, thank the men, women, and children who have generously donated to the Veterans Memorial Park, honoring all servicemen and women who have protected our freedom in times of peace and war. We cannot comprehend your worry or your grief when the spirit of selfless patriotism must have rivaled a mother's love for her child. To all those who thank us and commemorate our service, we humbly reply, it was an honor. During World War II, the U.S. Army established the Boeing B-17 Flying Fortress Training Base just west of Lewiston. That training base became the Lewiston Municipal Airport, which houses the last remaining Norden bomb site storage facility within the United States. Knowing that important little tidbit of military history helps explain while walking through the Veterans Memorial Park, there's a Minuteman missile sitting prominently right in the middle of the display. On quick approach to the end of our route for the eastern side of Montana, we come into the city of Roundup, the county seat of Musselshell County with a population of about 1,700 people. The name Roundup pretty much says it all, as this city served as a place for cattlemen to round up their cattle along the Musselshell River. It also served as the trailhead for the Great Montana Centennial Cattle Drive, hosted in September of 1989. The event commemorated the 100 years of statehood for Montana with a 6-day cattle drive across 60 miles of mountains and prairies. From Roundup to Billings, more than 2,800 cattle were driven across the terrain in recognition of the cowboys who helped to settle Montana. With our time exploring the Great Plains along the eastern side of Montana quickly coming to an end, we find ourselves at the Deadman's Basin Reservoir. From here, there seems to be nothing around for miles in any direction, and you can enjoy the entire place all to yourselves, which is exactly what Aichan and I did as we walked around the trails and enjoyed a beautiful sunset together. Knowing that the western side of the state is going to have nothing but mountains in store for us, we enjoy one last walk along flat, level terrain before we get to the adventures ahead. A great spot to bring the first part of our journey to an end.
All right. That covers the first half of our time spent in Montana. We have covered the entire eastern half of the state over the last 3 days. We managed to take our 4 days worth of routing and squeeze one more day out of there. So Aichan and I are continuing to move forward at a pretty rapid pace. Right now we find ourselves at the Deadman's Basin Reservoir, which has a pretty nice campground. So Aichan and I are going to camp out here, enjoy this beautiful view out of the reservoir as the sun sets down, and get ready to start the day tomorrow. I hope you guys have enjoyed this trip through the eastern side of Montana as much as we have. After running through the higher elevations of Wyoming, trudging through the mountains in the snow, coming down here to Montana, even with this wind blowing down on us the way it is, the days have warmed up significantly. We have not seen any more snow since we've come into the state, and every day is getting warmer. With a little bit of luck, the end of our very long winter has come to an end. Looking forward to what the next half of Montana has in store for us. Like this video, subscribe, stay tuned for updates, and we'll see you out on the trails.